This episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast is brought to you by Nomadicare. Now, personally, I love Nomadicare. I've used Nomadicare, and I recommend the company to all new travelers. What Nomadicare does is it takes the fear out of getting set up with a bad recruiter, which is the biggest fear that you have jumping into this journey. So they sit down, they interview recruiters, they vet them, get them on a list, and then provide them to you as a free service, as a free recruiter matchmaking service in order to get you started on your journey. Now, usually you only get 2 recruiters going through Nomadicare, but being a listener of the show, you can get 3. So this is how it's going to work. You go to nomadicare.com/Dylan. You will get set up with 3 recruiters to be on your dream team, as well as a guide to get you started on your journey.
Hey Nomads, we got EmpoweRx today talking about independent contracting. I'm trying to remember. MK, you were in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Eric, you were in
Denver, Colorado.
And then Freddie, where were you?
Austin. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the New Medical Nomads podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dylan Cowdery. This is part 2 of the independent contracting episode, talking about a non-traditional way to travel, as if travel wasn't already non-traditional enough. We're branching out and becoming our own bosses and doing really, really cool stuff with a really cool opportunity. But this is going to be a little bit more nitty-gritty. So just forewarning that a lot of this information is going to be very specific on your situation. We have a wide variety of listeners between nurses and therapists and sonographers, and then also just a wide variety between states and specifics of where you're at in life. And so a lot of this is going to be just generalized questions. So if you have any questions specific to your situation, wanting to know what the next step is, definitely reach out to these guys, and all that information will be down in the show notes. And also, if you say, hey, I heard you guys on the podcast, it helps me out too, just to get an idea of how many listeners we're actually helping with this information. So say you're friends with me, because most of my listeners are friends with me, and we can help you guys out. But MK, what are some of the first steps into becoming an independent contractor?
So with our process, the first step that we do is we have an intake assessment and a phone call with Eric. Since Eric's been in the trenches as a traveler and also is an independent contractor, we think it's a really great fit to have them talk with somebody, that's kind of apples to apples for the most part, can compare situations and kind of get a firsthand view of what it's going to be like. And then we have a questionnaire that allows us as a team to assess whether we think this person's going to be a good fit for independent contracting. So that's our first steps in the process. Yeah. And then from there, basically what we do is set up a bunch of appointments, and which we do video conferencing, obviously because we're working with people all over, and then build a roadmap for that specific clinician to reach their goals as an independent contractor. So depending on their state, depending on their situation, we'd look at what the best business entity is for them to get set up, how much it's going to cost, all that type of stuff, and then we set them up with consultations with our partners. So they can talk with an accountant, they can talk with a financial planner. We show them how to use the tools that we have to help with their financial aspects of the independent contracting, health insurance, and all that kind of stuff. So we walk them through a 2-week process, but just to kind of get started, we do that intake and make sure it's going to work out for everybody.
Got it. And for the listeners, there are different types of businesses out there. And so one of the steps is deciding which one's going to work best. And there's things you'll hear like LLCs or sole proprietorships and things like that. And a lot of it comes down to tax codes and understanding which will be the most beneficial. But there's also kind of like more risk and liability depending on which one you choose. And so that is something that MK was talking about. And it's great that you guys already have those connections made, already trusted people that they can go to. So it's just, you get started, you get boom, 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 this is where you need to go, and you can just like fast track on this whole process. It's very exciting.
That's kind of the whole idea, is to make it painless, right? Just make it as easy as possible.
For state-wise, other than like the accountants and kind of the people that you guys have met, is there any like specific places that people have to go within their own states to kind of get started? And I'm thinking more of like the LLC and the sole proprietorships. Maybe they have to go through the Better Business Bureau, things like that. Are there any consistent steps you guys see state to state that somebody would have to do in order to get started?
Well, typically, everything can be done online as far as business entities set up, to answer that question. Typically, we recommend everybody get in touch with the Small Business Development Center and network with people, because that's part of being a good business owner in general, is getting people that are going to encourage you, right, and root for you, and then also get a network of professionals that you can bounce ideas off of, and then, you know, obviously find ways to market yourself as well. So we typically recommend that to everybody that we work with, just as part of the process on encouraging them, especially as we get towards the end of the process and they're looking to start getting out there and really, you know, put in their rubber on the road kind of thing.
Got it. Yeah. When I was setting up the LLC for this podcast, I think in Missouri, it took me like 45 minutes to do online. Like, it was super quick, and it was like one of those things I kept pushing off. I was going to be, I'm going to need a whole day for this thing. And ended up taking me no time at all. So it kind of goes back to the things you think are going to be hard are going to be easy, and the things you think are going to be easy are going to be hard.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What are some of the common or biggest mistakes you see when people are beginning to go into becoming an independent contractor?
I would say from information that I've seen and from working with clients, it is setting up the correct business entity. That would be one of the biggest mistakes. You know, people don't quite understand the differences between them all, because there's quite a few of them. So I say that would be one big one. And then also not really realizing how to set up their financials correctly, making sure that they have everything in place as far as once they have a business entity, they need a separate bank account. That's very common that people don't realize that, especially if they're working for themselves, right? So those are, I think, the two most common ones. There's a lot more details with traveling, as we talked about in part one, where if, you know, people are going to be, you know, bebopping all over the United States, there's some other details that would, and very common mistakes that can happen with folks that are doing that if they're not set up correctly in states they're traveling to.
Got it. You bringing up the bank account for the business is definitely hitting home, because that was one of my biggest headaches setting this up, was going to the bank, setting up the conversation I needed to have with the right person. I get to the right person, they say, oh wait, you don't actually have the information you need. Had to go back, had to apply for an EIN number, all this other stuff. Finally got that in, got to bring it back. Oh, can't use this bank. I gotta go somewhere else. And it was a trial by fire for sure. And just having somebody there to, you know, basically show the steps would have saved me multiple days of frustration.
We could have helped you out, Dylan.
One of the things that I am most curious about is, how do you find jobs as an independent contractor?
We have multiple routes. So again, this comes back to an individual, you know, and their preference and their field and where they're going to be working at. I actually am working with a travel company that works exclusively with 1099s. So I know, right? Travel company out there that's willing to do that. They exist. So we have some partnerships, and we have growing partnerships with people, you know, that are helping us get into some of the acute care settings. But we also help people with direct marketing. Depending on where they want to go, we try and put together something for them that will allow them to be the most successful. And that's the other portion of what we do as we're guiding you along the way, is we help you to find the job that's going to work best for you.
Got it. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the biggest things, again, with just starting a business in general, and I'm sure, Dylan, you can speak to this as well, is that you want to, you know, when you're looking to market yourself specifically, you want to make sure that you have contacts, right, and a network in place of people that you can reach out to. And one of the things that's commonly talked about in the travel industry, and I know from a recruiter perspective, it's like making sure you get those references from each 3-month contract, right? Making sure that, you know, you're the person on the floor that everybody's glad is there. So I think those things are just in general with any professional endeavor that you're doing and any job you're doing. But when you're looking to step out on your own, and then you start to think about, well, where do I want to work and where do I want to market myself to, looking to that core group of, you know, your network first is always going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. And then, as Eric mentioned, you know, we can help you just to figure out, how else can I do it? You know, what if I want to go somewhere that I don't know anybody? There's certainly ways that you can do it. We know clinicians that have and that are doing it successfully.
That's right. One of the things that came to mind, I'm glad to hear that there are other avenues and companies out there that work specifically with independent contractors to set them up with job opportunities. Because just thinking of independent contracting coming to this table, I always thought it was just you picking up a phone, calling a random hospital, saying like, hey, who do I need to talk to? And then kind of like doing that route. And you finally get to the person who's like, do you need somebody? Can I come and work for you guys? So glad to hear that that's not the only way that you can do it.
That is one way.
It is one way.
That is one way. Yeah, there's other routes.
When you do get that right person on the phone, when you are making those direct relationships with the hospital, what does kind of the contract signing look like? What can you describe the scenario of what all goes into that and sitting down at the hospital and saying, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to sign this contract.
So from my perspective, again, this is specific to my situation. Working with this company was almost no different than working with a regular travel agency.
Wow. Okay.
The contract was put together. I mean, obviously it's worded, the wording's a little bit different, but the onboarding process, at least that portion of it, is 100% familiar. It was kind of crazy when I did it the first time. I was like, wow, I'm still giving them all of the stuff that I need for my compliance. I'm still turning in all of my, all of my immunizations and all of those things, and I'm still signing a contract. I'm still getting my first day instructions, all of those things. So it's not that unfamiliar from that setting in my personal experience, but there are also other things. I think MK could probably speak to some of that with other clients that we've had too.
Okay.
Sure. So yeah, like Eric said, obviously, you know, they're handling every bit of it. On the flip side, it would be you're communicating directly with them. You're providing all of your profile information as far as your credentials, as well as your immunizations. You've got to be 100% accountable to getting your drug tests. You know, all that stuff falls on you. As far as the contract signing goes, I mean, typically, you know, the facility usually has contracts that you can just work through negotiating with them. If not, you know, we have a partner that you can look to that will help you create a contract that you're comfortable with, that you can present to them. So far, you know, most facilities have this. Because you have to remember that physicians work in this capacity all the time. This isn't anything that's new to any healthcare facility under the sun. So, you know, and you just have to make sure you're reading it. And again, if you need legal counsel, finding a way to make sure that that's reviewed and you're comfortable with it. But they're pretty straightforward. And it just kind of knowing, and obviously we walk through these with our people too, and just make sure that they're comfortable with them. And I mean, it's really relatively easy. And in some capacities, it's easier. Let me just put it that way. Because a lot of the travel contracts where you have these multiple people involved, right? The contracts are really robust. I mean, I've seen some that are really insane, just working as a recruiter, that have a ton of tax information in it, just things that aren't even applicable to the actual job or the contract, that are way more applicable to payroll. And so in some cases, it's much more streamlined of a process as far as the contracts go.
Got it. So I guess that took a lot of stress off of my shoulders if I were to be an independent contractor, of kind of approaching a hospital and setting like, hey, here's what I'm charging type of thing, and trying to figure out what that money hourly cost is worth. So most of them already have their own contracts that you just need to show up and sign. that already has the predetermined rate that you would be receiving as an independent contractor?
Well, you definitely want to negotiate your rate before you sign anything, for sure. And I coach everybody into having an idea of what they're willing to make at that, right? At that specific contract. And I would coach anybody doing that, whether you're going to work with an agency or not, know what you're worth and know what you're willing, to take. And then I would let them start. Always, right? Just always hear what they have to say and hear what that rate is going to be, and do a lot more listening than talking in that capacity, but not be afraid to come back with a number if you're unsatisfied with the one that they're giving you. But yeah, they know what they're doing. They have a plan. You just have to roll with it and know what your plan is, really.
Got it. Now, something I've heard with staffing agencies working with these hospitals is that sometimes they don't get paid until a month later, 2 months later, things like that. As an independent contractor, do you have to worry about that as well with your payments coming in? Is it now no longer weekly as it would be for a normal traveler?
So again, it's going to depend on the situation that you're in. With some of the partnerships we have set up, I actually still get paid weekly. Okay. I just don't have any taxes withdrawn from it. So it's an uncut check that goes directly to my business account. From there, I kind of have to disseminate it out where everything goes. But I still do get paid weekly. But you are, depending on how you structure your contract or whether you're working through an entity that will work with 1099s, you can be subject to the hospital's billing cycle.
Got it. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
And we have a tool, just to kind of chime in a little bit on that takes care of the invoicing portion for you. And so far, the clients that I've spoken with haven't been subject to wait a very long time for their pay. They're on the payroll cycle that like the staff would be paid on.
Mm-hmm. So. Okay. Mm-hmm. Thinking about contracts being broken, and this has happened to me. You go to a place, they say they want you for 13 weeks. Turns out they find a permanent person. You're there for only 10 weeks. If a hospital breaks that contract, are you kind of on your own as an independent contractor? What happens after that point?
Well, I would say it depends on how you negotiate your contract, number one. So if that's something that you're concerned about, I would encourage you to ask them to add language or provide a contract that takes care of that. Mm-hmm. I've seen it both ways. I've worked with people that have a clause in their contracts that they have to have a 30-day notice, whether they get somebody on board or not. Mm-hmm. So, contracts are malleable. I think that's one thing that as a recruiter, when I was working in that capacity, that actually kind of surprised me that traveling clinicians didn't realize that they could negotiate those contracts, that they could actually ask to change the terms of them. And so that's one thing that we really do want to empower people to do in an independent contracting capacity, because you are the one that's making this happen. And if there's things that are important to you, especially if they're deal breakers, you want to make sure that it's in that contract and you negotiate that on the front end. That being said, to kind of, of course, yes, you are on your own, right? So you negotiate that contract and then you have to adhere to it just as they do. But when you lose that job, you've got to find another one. So just like any traveling professional, what do you try to do? You try to start looking for something prior to the contract ending. And so I just circle back to the concept of having a network right in place so that you have other places that you can go to and start working in a more quickly.
Got it. And that kind of covers what my next question was about how to minimize your risk, especially financially, working as an independent contractor. It sounds like the typical things that I would want in a normal travel contract, 30-day guarantee notice for cancellation, a certain hourly guarantee per week would be things that I would be looking for. Is there anything else that is maybe a little bit different with independent contracting that you would want people to be aware of to minimize their risks when jumping into this?
Well, I would encourage everybody who's starting a business, no matter what business it is, to have a nest egg, right? don't jump into this when you've got $150 in the bank. You want to really plan for this. And that's, again, something that we would coach people on the front end of this. And we've talked to people and they're like, I'm really interested in doing this, and I'm like, well, you want to make sure that you do have a nest egg before you jump into this. Of course, we want to work with you. We want to get you going, but we want you to be successful and we don't want you to be stressed out. And so that's my biggest, coaching advice to anybody that wants to step into this is take a look at what things are going to cost and make sure that you're set up, to have 3 months, I'd say a minimum, of finances backing you so that you can, proceed and feel confident and get your first.
And we're going to look over all this stuff in the intake assessment, to review if somebody's, appropriate to proceed with doing this kind of work, try to advise them in the correct way. So.
Got it. Yeah, that's actually something I recommend to all travelers, even just on the traditional traveling side, that having a little bit of money in the background, just in case you need it, just in case that, that place you really wanted to work and they would only give you the 2-week notice and all of a sudden you're out of a job and you're stuck in Hawaii, whatever the worst case scenario you want to be, that you have something to fall back on. But I would imagine that with independent contracting, there might be a little bit more of a barrier maybe to find the next job. So you might want to have a bigger nest egg versus just a typical travel contract.
Yep, I think it'd be wise.
Got it. Is there any recommendations that you guys give, I guess, for maybe like clinical insurance or anything like that? Is there a greater risk in litigation if you are your own company, you're an independent contractor, versus being underneath the umbrella of the hospital plus a staffing agency?
Well, I'm happy to speak to this as well. Basically, there's a couple ways that you mitigate your, liability. One is setting up your business entity correctly. So that automatically will do that for you. In a lot of capacities, we do recommend that everybody has liability insurance as a medical professional working out there. And then we do have a, partner that we can recommend that provides really reasonable legal backup if you do need it. That's the long and short of it. It's really not that difficult. You just put the things in place. They're really not even that expensive. I don't think they're cost prohibitive at all. That's it. It's really that simple. I know it sounds like it's too good to be true, but it actually isn't.
To follow up with that, you were saying how it turns out the insurance, like clinical insurance, really isn't all that much looking at it. And when we were getting ready for our clinical internships as PT students, as graduate students, because we do a full year of it, we have to pay a certain fee to the school, even though that we're not in classrooms or not, associated with the school at all. We're basically paying the school money so we can go work for free elsewhere, which you guys are, you're all clinicians, you know this. But I always thought the payment that we were making, it was like $6,000 for over a summer, was going towards the insurance. And what we actually found was it was about, I think, $10 per student for the insurance to cover us in case, oops, I dropped, Margaret over here and now she's got a broken hip type of thing. But yeah, the insurance was actually surprisingly cheap. And turns out school is surprisingly expensive.
Yeah, that's all right.
Well, before we get into the fun questions, do you guys have anything else that you wanted to let the listeners know?
Just from a personal standpoint, and one of the reasons why I think it's really important for us to kind of push this is that I think all of us as clinicians, when we go through school, we're always taught to push the profession forward, right? To kind of push it to be what it can be and kind of keep developing it, keep learning, and keep progressing. And I think that traveling has kind of done that, right? Like, it allows us to go out there and push the profession. But I think that even becoming more autonomous and starting our own businesses and doing things like this and becoming invested propels our industry too. So that's part of why I know I'm behind this. I think that's part of why Freddie and MK are here. Is we're actually here to literally empower the professions that we're dealing with. We want to help people to achieve whatever it is that they want to from this and actually continue moving things forward. So that was something that, I actually talked to a few CEOs about that, if you guys are willing to work with us in this capacity, if we keep expanding this field, I think that the sky's the limit, really. Mm-hmm. So it's something to get excited about just from that standpoint. Aside from all the financial stuff and everything else, we really are doing this to kind of push forward the clinicians, take control of your own vocation and just go with it.
And from my experience, like being in the ICU, back when our parents were growing up, it was, everybody was a company person. Now it's like you'll see, everybody's going to MP school, CRNA school, or going to traveling. There's always going to be a staff shortage at these hospitals. And, being a staff employee, they really don't get paid what you should for the work you're doing. It's like you're playing so many roles. You're taking care of the family members. You're a waiter. You're like answering the phones. You're the unit secretary. You're doing all this stuff. It's so stressful, and it's like the pay's not going there, and inflation just keeps going up. And it's just like I don't know how anybody can work a staff job and have a family, and it's just they just don't pay enough really for the work we do.
Okay, we'll save you for last. I'm going to go into the fun questions, and then we'll wrap up and be able to kind of give out all your guys' information and where the listeners can go to next. But I was interested, since you've all been travelers before, what is your favorite travel story?
Favorite travel story? This one, I don't know if it's necessarily a travel story, but it happened to me while I was traveling. So I'm from Colorado, kind of long-haired hippie state. So my first assignment was down in Arizona, eastern Arizona, in a place called Chandler Regional Hospital. So it's kind of funny. I was probably the only guy there with long hair. I mean, it's just like I'm walking down the hallway, I'm pushing a bed, no patient underneath like that, and this cardiac surgeon comes around the corner, and I hear, "Hey, ma'am." So I keep walking down the hallway a little bit more, and keeps getting a little bit more and more urgent. It says, ma'am, and it's starting to get more and more upset. Man, that doctor's mad at somebody. I don't know. So ends up he's right behind me, taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around, with my goatee on my face, and I saw the most terrified look come across this surgeon's face. And I'm sure he just had no idea what to say at that point. So whatever his question was, it apparently wasn't that important because he just took off and turned around. Like 90, went the opposite direction from me. So that was one of my first few weeks working down there. That's one I like to let everybody know about.
Well, I guess that just means you have a really nice figure, and just like,
right.
I think that's all.
I'll take it.
I'm getting ready for my 2-month trip to Thailand and Bali, but something I've never done before is actually growing out my hair. So if you have any tips on what to do to grow out the hair, I'm wide open. Because I am,
and just leave it alone, man. Just let it fly.
All right.
Don't do anything. This is more.
MK, do you have a favorite travel story?
Well, I don't know if I have a favorite, because I wasn't a traveler, but as a recruiter, I will share that I called myself the gypsy recruiter. And I would actually drive for hours just to meet up with my clinicians when they were on assignment. And I got to see a lot of really cool places as a result of that, and really enjoyed kind of having that face-to-face time with them to hear about what they were going through or how their day was or how they were enjoying their assignment. So it's not nearly as funny as Eric's story, but that is what I have to contribute.
It's great. And Freddie, do you have a favorite travel story?
Yeah, so I took a trip to Thailand also, and I went over there and ended up losing my debit card and out of money for like 3 or 4 days. So I had to be kind of resourceful on how I managed what little money I had and where I needed to stay at. So it's a long story. I could go on for a little while on that one. So
Well, what did you?
Saved you, right?
what's that?
Was it Couch Surfer that saved your life?
Oh yeah,
Did you
yeah.
crash a couple of random couches?
Yeah.
I thought he was just gonna ask, some fellow travelers like, "Hey, can I borrow some cash?" I'm sure.
Actually, some were really helpful.
Oh,
They
good.
helped me out, pay for some stuff. So
And for the listeners that aren't aware, there is an app out there called Couch Surfer, and I actually haven't heard much about it recently, but it was out kind of the time that I heard about Airbnb, and from what I can tell, it's pretty much you just show up, you kind of say, "Hey, I'm going to be in this area," and somebody offers their couch, and you just crash. And in my opinion, you're never too old or never too professional to crash on somebody's couch. Is there anything you guys who have been traveling have bought in that's underneath like $100 that you would recommend somebody getting? Something that's really helped you with your travels? Could be a phone app, could be something tangible, anything like that.
I'd say a good backpack. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no. Plastic plates. It's amazing how many places you go to, you just don't have plates. So like 2 plates, plastic, silverware, plastic. I still use them now. They're my camping gear because I'm not out of state anymore. But yeah, and like and a French press because you always need coffee.
Yeah.
Some places don't have a coffee maker, and every nurse and every clinician knows that you need coffee in the morning. So yeah. Sorry, okay, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was going to say, you got to have a really good backpack, a headlamp, and a knife, and you can do all that for under $100.
As you're getting ready for the Appalachian Trail, right?
Yes, exactly. That I never leave home without those things.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm just now getting into, actually, I'm going to be borrowing a backpack for my trip. And
nice.
Because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to get. I have like this thing I've been carrying around since school, and apparently it's not appropriate, but my buddy's got a 70-liter backpack, and I was like, oh wow,
nice.
I don't think I'm gonna have enough stuff to fill it.
That's a good thing. It'll be lighter.
Definitely, for sure. Freddie, do you have any items?
There's this app I recently downloaded. It's Lime, and it's like these scooters. I think they have them in San Francisco too. It's just super convenient. You don't have to get an Uber or just go if it's not too far away. Just get on one of those.
Yeah. There, I was at a smaller, we had the bigger traveler meetup recently with about 40 plus travelers that showed up here in San Jose that I hosted. And then after that, there was a smaller meetup during the week, and they used the app, and it was just like, I think they might shut off at a certain time, but they were actually able to still use it after like 9, 10 p.m. whenever we were getting out of there. But it looked like they kind of like synced it with their phone. And then it just kind of lit up, and then they were able to write it off. From what I hear, I know you're supposed to have your helmet on those.
Yeah, that's a joke.
And also not to get ticketed. But is there anything special that works with that app, or how does it work?
No, you can use put your debit card on there and load up money onto it, and then just it's super cheap. It's fun. It can be a little dangerous. You just got to be cognizant of your surroundings. So,
do you have to leave them at a charging station, or like what happens when you get to your destination?
No, you just take a picture of where you're at, and it just puts the GPS on a GPS map where they're all located, so the next rider can find it. And I think they hire people to come pick them up and charge.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Got it. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, MK, did you have anything else that you wanted to tell the listeners?
I would say I just wanted to say that as clinicians, one of our biggest things is empowerment. And one of my biggest messages is you guys hold all the cards. So I want to empower you to know that, it's your certifications, it's your skills, it's your brain, it's your hands that are out there in the field helping people. And that's like a big message. So I'd love that I get to share that with your listeners, and just thank you to all of you that are out there doing that. I really, truly appreciate it. So that's what I would say.
All right. Well, we gave your contact information in the previous episode, but could you also say it again for any listeners joining now?
Sure.
So,
and yeah, Freddie, I was going to say Freddie because he does all the social media. I'll leave that up to him.
So on Facebook, it's EmpoweRx Inc. And then on Instagram, it's EmpoweRx_Inc. And MK can tell you about the LinkedIn page.
We have a LinkedIn page. It's EmpoweRx, and we pronounce it EmpoweRx Inc. And you can find it through any of our personal pages as well. And then we have our website, which is EmpoweRx.me. And then you can always just give us a call. I know that's kind of antiquated at this point in our lives, but our number is 503-837-2800.
Awesome. Well, for those listeners who are driving right now, all that information will be in the show notes, so don't worry about pulling over and plugging it into your phone. But thank you so much, guys, for coming on. And for the listeners, if you're looking for, the next step in learning more about this independent contracting thing, I definitely recommend these guys. I've had quite a few conversations with Eric on the telephone. I think we've gone over 2 hours before. Not that he'll do that for everyone, but get to two social people together, and all that can happen. But if you end up reaching out to them, definitely say that you heard them from the podcast. Just lets us know doing these things are good, and it's actually getting information out there, and good information that people are interested in learning more. But if you were looking for the next episode, the official launches happen on the New Medical Nomads podcast Facebook page. If you have any questions directed towards these guys, you can also drop them in New Medical Nomads Facebook group. They'll all be a part of that as well. And then if you're seeing us on YouTube, watching Spotify, iTunes, any ratings, hearts, likes, silly faces, comments, engagements, subscriptions, anything like that allows more people to see this information. It allows us to help more people, which is the ultimate goal of this podcast. But thank you so much, guys, for coming on. This has been a very mysterious part of the travel industry that I'm finally glad to get some information out there.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Dylan.
No problem. And for all you travelers, all you nomads, you have safe travels. Hey Nomads, Dylan here, just doing a little bit of post-recording, but wanted to say thank you so much to EmpoweRx for sharing their wealth of knowledge about independent contracting. If you are looking into independent contracting, I highly recommend them. If you're looking just for more information about independent contracting, you can reach out to them as well. And then also, they are a consulting business, and for being a listener of the show, if you say that you heard them through the podcast, that you're a friend of mine, Dylan, that you know me through the show, you will get 10% off of whatever products work best for you if you end up going through them. So just give the show a shout out, tell them that you came through there, and all you nomads have safe travels.